and welcome to Library Scented Life. My name is Sydney. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in September. I read a total of 6 books this month. So the first few books I read this month were actually for the Avatar readathon, which I was kind of participating in. I was in the White Lotus group, which means you can choose prompts from any of the teams and just kind of complete what you want, and you're not actually competing. My original plan was that each week I would be doing one of the teams. So the first week I'd be doing all the Water Tribe prompts. The second week was the Earth Kingdom, but I kind of fell off the wagon there. So I do have my Water Tribe reads and my Earth Kingdom reads, and then after that I just kind of read whatever. So we're gonna get into that. So the first book I read was Totally Disgusting by Bill Wallace. This was for a prompt, I believe that was read a favorite book from your childhood. So I really enjoyed this book as a kid and I read it multiple times and it felt like such a big book back then. This book follows a cat from moving from having his mother there to being adopted into a family. From the very first pages, his family is attacked by rats and he kind of is traumatized by it. So the rest of the book is about him dealing with fear and bravery and making friends with a dog, and basically they love their humans, and then they discover that the humans are trying to make a play fort in the backyard in a place where there are rats, and they can smell that there are rats there, and the rats are plotting to attack the cat's person. So the cat has to face his fears and basically save his human from the rats. It's really cute. I gave it 3 stars because I enjoyed reading it, but I didn't love it as much as I did as a kid. But as a kid, I would have given this 5 stars. So the next thing I read was the Dark Crystal Creation Myths graphic novel number 1 by Brian Froud. So if you've ever watched the movie The Dark Crystal, it's really creepy and the world is really interesting, and it doesn't really go much into the world because the story takes place after the world is already established. So these graphic novels have that purpose of establishing the world and just all the little details that were existing in the film but weren't really explained. So this is kind of literally creation myths. This is the creation of the world of Thra, which is where the Dark Crystal takes place. And at the same time I was reading this, the TV show The Dark Crystal actually premiered on Netflix, so I've been watching that as well, and it's just really cool to go back into this world. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. I did like it, but it wasn't a continuous story. It is, like it says, creation myths, so it's kind of like one story after another, which I do enjoy sometimes, but in a graphic novel, since they are so short, I prefer for it to be all one story. Apparently the further graphic novels, and not creation myths, but there's another one that actually has a story, so I think I'll enjoy those more. So after I finish the next creation myths, I'm definitely going to jump into those. So the next book I read was the group book for the Avatar readathon, and that was The Rise of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. And the time before Aang, the main Avatar in the show, when the Earth Kingdom was the one who had the Avatar, it was Avatar Kyoshi. So Avatar Kyoshi ended up doing such amazing things, and this is her origin story. In this story, someone else is mistaken for the Avatar, and the world thinks they are the Avatar, and Kyoshi actually works for them and helps them just do things around their house and things like that, but she is actually the Avatar, as we all know. And there's a lot of twists and turns and betrayals and friendship themes, also queer themes, which I really enjoyed. So this was a really fun read, and I did find it like jumping back into the Avatar world, but almost not as deeply as, say, reading the graphic novels with the show characters or watching the show. It was more like watching Korra. So it's like it has that Avatar vibe, but it's not that exact Avatar story because it's really hard to recreate that friendship without repeating it completely. So I think they did a really good job, but like I said, it's really hard to live up to anything that Avatar The Last Airbender original did. The next book I read a little bit in the physical book, and then I found the audiobook on YouTube illegally, but I listened to that because I did find it kind of hard to get through, and I was reading some other books at the same time for the Avatar readathon, so I kind of listened to this while I was cooking or making art or doing whatever, so I really enjoyed that experience. And that was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. So I picked this up expecting like a really deep fantasy, like almost like an adventure fantasy with like fighting and magic and stuff, and it does have all those things, but it was completely different than I expected. So this kind of tells the story of Kvothe, I think is how you pronounce it, and Kvothe, I can't say the name. So this is Kvothe telling his own legend, basically, to a scribe, and this whole book is day 1 of his story, of him telling his story, and there's day 2 and day 3. So day 1 is kind of like his childhood into like I think just until he's 20, maybe a bit younger, and so he does go to university, and it feels a lot like a Harry Potter read, not in the fact that it's middle grade or anything, but in the fact that he's at a school and there's like alchemy and kind of magic. There's this like mysterious magic that no one really believes exists, but he's seen it himself as a child, so he knows it exists, or was he just imagining it? So it kind of goes through the beginning stages of his life and becoming the legend he did become, which is really cool, but I didn't go into this expecting that at all, but I did really enjoy it. I found it funny, I found the characters very intriguing and fun to just journey along with, and I'm excited to see whether some of these characters come back in the future or where these characters end up. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I did find it kind of hard to read through just physically, so I did enjoy the audiobook quite a bit. So just so you know, you can find it for free on YouTube. Listen to it while you can. It's probably going to be taken down soon. The next book I'm going to talk about might be a surprise to some of you. It was a surprise to me when I put it in my book outlet cart, and it might be a surprise because I don't read contemporaries or romances that often. I find them boring sometimes, or I find them problematic. Recently I had a book outlet order where I ordered a bunch of contemporary and romance because I want to try. There are some good ones out there, and I know there are, but all the ones I've read so far have just not met the mark for me, so I picked up All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. It was a very quick read, and it was a page turner. I really enjoyed the story. So this story kind of flashes back between the then and the now. So the then is her falling in love with her now husband and kind of how the romance started and their meet cute, as well as just the dreams and hopes they had for each other. And then the now is they've been married and they've struggled with fertility issues, which has put a strain on their marriage because they are feeling it's feeling hard to connect without feeling guilty, or without feeling that it needs to result in a child that it probably won't result in because of the infertility that they're struggling with. So I found this a really powerful representation of struggling with infertility and just dealing with problems in the relationship and how it stems out to different problems, and miscommunication as well as misunderstanding can really lead to big problems. I found it really interesting to read about a marriage because I don't normally read there's usually a marriage as a subplot or just like a set thing in books I read, like fantasies or science fiction or anything, but it's not usually about the marriage. So I found it actually kind of fun to read. Their love for each other felt real. It felt like they had a lot of personality and that their personalities blended well together. It went really into their internal emotions, mostly the main character Quinn, who we hear a lot from, but it also went into the internal emotions she thinks that her husband is feeling, and then you kind of guess whether she's right or not by what he says and does, and you can kind of see her misperceptions based on her insecurities. So I found it really cool to read. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I think it is my beginning of maybe liking contemporaries and romances. Let me know in the comments down below if there are any good ones that aren't problematic, any queer ones, anything like that that I might enjoy, and I will pick them up. So the last book I fully completed this month was Smoke and Mirrors by K.D. Halbrook. So this was a really fun little middle grade about 2 kids, mostly following the older sister, but she also has a younger brother, who grow up in the circus. Their parents are both circus performers, and they are friends with the circus performers, and they're all kind of a big family who live in the same area and rehearse in the weekends, and they have been homeschooled most of their lives, and then they decide to put them in the school that all the kids on the island that the circus is on go to. The only problem is the island kids and families don't really approve of the circus because they think it brings bad luck or bad vibes. They think they're crazy. They think multiple bad things about them. And there is, of course, a lot of stigma when they go to school. There is some bullying issues. And then there's also another plot where there is something called the Smoke, which is said to come to the circus and take people and turn them into animals. And then the animals go away and they never see those people again. So this character is dealing with loving the circus and believing in the magic of the circus, and then being bullied for believing in it, and being bullied for even just being a part of it, and she starts to resent where she came from. And it's kind of a story of rediscovering that, as well as how your emotions can impact other people and how we need to appreciate the things around us and the people surrounding us. It was a very family oriented novel, so it sounds all great. except for the fact that I didn't really enjoy it that much. I enjoyed some aspects of it. I enjoyed some of the adult figures in this person's life. I enjoyed some of the internal turmoil she was experiencing and how it presented outwardly. I appreciated the flowery language around the circus and kind of romanticizing the circus. It's always fun to read about little circuses like that. I didn't enjoy the writing overall. I found it very choppy. I found the dialogue kind of unrealistic sometimes. And I also found that there was midway through, or 3/4 through, the plot completely shifted. It shifted from an everyday school struggling with the world kind of story to being in a fantasy world story and struggling with the fantasy world. I see what the author was trying to do, reflecting this fantasy world onto the real world, but I didn't really love it. If they had been in the fantasy world this whole book, I think I would have enjoyed it more, but it felt like a really random, sudden plot jump that I was just kind of jolting. There are good aspects to this book, and I'm sure if I was a kid reading this, I would really enjoy it, but now that I'm kind of more critical of books, I found it just a little jarring and just not as great as I would have hoped it to be. But there are a lot of people out there who would totally enjoy this. And that is it for my September wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you read this month and what was your favorite book you read this month? Thank you so much for watching, and I'm so excited to see you in my next video. Bye!
Mm-hmm.